Hey everyone, today let's take a close look at Psalm chapter 22 and see if it's prophetic as some people claim it is. Shalom everybody, and welcome to Beit Tefillah. Psalm 22, often erroneously referred to by Messianics as the crucifixion psalm. We're going to dig into this chapter today and see that it has nothing to do with a crucifixion. However, most people relate this psalm to the New Testament Messiah due to a few verses jumping out at them from the crucifixion story, and it's easy to see why they would think this chapter was describing what a Messiah supposedly went through. First, let's realize that Elohim never told anyone in the Tanakh about a coming New Testament Messiah, and that King David certainly would not have been writing a prophetic chapter concerning one. Nowhere does Psalm chapter 22 ever insinuate or claim that it is prophetic, and nobody prior to 2,000 years ago would have ever thought that this chapter had anything to do with some kind of future Messiah. King David was very expressive in his writing and his music. Psalms chapter 22 is simply King David lamenting to Elohim. Now, the problem started when the creative writers that invented this New Testament decided to take little bits and pieces of this chapter and include them in their creative but fictional account of their man-God Messiah. Had they not used this chapter and had others not tweaked the text a little here and there to give their Messiah some pseudo-validity, nobody would have ever thought Psalms chapter 22 was anything but David crying out to Elohim. Okay, I want to stop and talk about a Hebrew word for a minute. It's Strong's H738, the Hebrew word ari. This word is found 80 times in the Tanakh, and it means lion. 79 of those 80 times it is used as lion or lions, all except for a single time. And that one single time, they incorrectly translated that word as pierced. Care to take a guess where they did that? If you guess this next verse, you'd be correct. Psalm 22:16, for dogs have surrounded me, a crowd of evil ones have encircled me, piercing my hands and my feet. Now this verse in this chapter is the clincher for Messianics who think that this chapter is a crucifixion psalm or pertaining to a crucified Messiah. And really, who wouldn't? We can admit that with pierced hands and feet. Of course you're going to think of that after reading the narrative of the Messiah in the New Testament, right? But that's not how this verse should read in Psalm 22. If it was translated properly, it would read like this. Psalm 22:16, for dogs have surrounded me, a crowd of evil ones have encircled me like lions at my hands and feet. David was very descriptive. He liked to use animals in his psalms, and he liked lions, as we're going to see in a second. Let's take a look at what the program eSword has with Strong's reference numbers for this word ari. Keep in mind that both eSword and Strong's are both Christian resources. I use them in this video, and I like to use them in a lot of other videos because a lot of people use Strong's, a lot of people use eSword, and that way we can all be on the same page. Now, Strong's Concordance is usually correct, but it does have a bit of a Christian slant to it. So when I do my research, I like to use Brown Driver Briggs, and especially the Comprehensive Etymological Dictionary of the Hebrew Language. That's a really good one. If you can get that, please do. So here we can easily see the word lion at the end of verse 13, the word pierce near the end of verse 16, and lion again in verse 21. I'll circle them here to make it easier for you to see them. Now let's show Strong's reference numbers to see what number comes up for all three of these words. See? All the same Hebrew words, Strong's H738, lion. It's right there in the Christian references. It's easy to spot the agenda, isn't it? Some people might stop me and say, well, hey, what do you mean agenda? Well, I've said many times in my videos that if you look up King James Bible on Wikipedia, it's going to tell you in the definition that King James gave the translators instructions intended to ensure that the new version would conform to the ecclesiology of the Christian church. For those who don't know what the definition of ecclesiology means, it's this. In Christian theology, ecclesiology is the study of the Christian church, the origins of Christianity, its relationship to Jesus, its role in salvation, its discipline, its destiny, and its leadership. Now, Psalm 22 could well have been changed before King James' time, but it does make you wonder what else was tweaked when King James had his writers tweak the scriptures here and there so they would conform to the ecclesiology of the Christian church. So we can easily see that the word pierce was used instead of lions in Psalm 22 to make it seem like it was referring to a future Messiah, and the New Testament pilfered quite a few other descriptive verses from this chapter of Psalms to try and give their Messiah validity. They ended up fooling a lot of people, but not everyone. Let's take a look at one more issue with this chapter. In Psalm 22, David wrote the following that I'm grouping together all in one spot to read together. Do not be far from me, for distress is near, for there is none to help. To the dust of death you are appointing me. Deliver my life from the sword, my only life from the power of the dog. And by reading that, it sure sounds to me like King David felt that he was going to die. King Saul was constantly trying to kill him, if you remember. So were many other people, including David's own son. It seemed like he was betrayed just about by everybody he knew, and he was tested and tried, and yet he remained a righteous servant of Elohim and a righteous king of Yisrael. He loved Elohim's Torah, but he still believed, and he felt like death was near. Is it any wonder in the very next chapter that King David wrote this? Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. The 23rd Psalm, right after this chapter we're discussing. Go read them both together and see why David wrote it. It's going to mean a lot more to you if you do. Okay, before someone else brings this up, and I know they're going to, before I finish here, I need to touch on another famous Pierce verse real quick, because I know someone is going to say, well, hey, what about this verse? The one I'm referring to is Zechariah 12:10. This is how it reads in most Bibles today. And I shall pour on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of favor and prayers. And they shall look on me whom they pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son. Once again, people are going to run into trouble when a verse like this is just ripped out of context and used without knowing why it was spoken or what it pertains to. If we read the book of Zechariah, we can easily see it's all about the end of days. Okay, for a good clue, we should see how the verse reads right before verse 10. In Zechariah 12:9, and it shall be in that day that I seek to destroy all the Gentiles that come against Jerusalem. And in the next chapter is another clue in this verse, Zechariah 13:2. And it shall be in that day, declares Yahuwah of hosts, that I cut off the names of the idols from the earth, and they shall be remembered no more, and I shall also remove the prophets and the unclean spirit from the earth. See? The end of days is when all this happens. The word that was used for pierce in Zechariah 12:10 is Strong's H1856, dakar. It means to stab, pierce, strike, thrust through, or wound. And we just read verse 13:2. Let's read that together with a verse that follows it and hear what's in that verse as well for a clue. Zechariah 13:2-3. And it shall come to pass in that day, says Yahuwah of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land, and they shall no more be remembered. And I will also cause the prophets and the unclean spirit to pass out of the land. And it shall come to pass that when any shall yet prophesy, then his father and his mother that begat him shall say unto him, You shall not live, for you speak lies in the name of Yahuwah, and his father and his mother that begat him shall thrust him through when he prophesies. Now you want to guess what Hebrew word was used for thrust him through? Well, there it is, dakar. That was used there as well. Once again, it's right here in the Christian references. There's another issue with Zechariah 12:10. It's not easy to spot at first, but once you see it, it jumps out at you. So let's read the verse again. And I shall pour on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of favor and prayers. And they shall look on me whom they pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son. So the verse reads, They shall look on me whom they pierced. Gives everybody the impression that the one who's speaking is the one who's being pierced. But then it goes on to say, They shall mourn for him. What? Let's read that again. They shall look on me whom they pierced, and they shall mourn for him. That doesn't even make any sense. That's because the translation is so terrible. This is how Zechariah 12:10 should be translated to read. And I shall pour on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of favor and prayers, and they shall look to me concerning who was thrust through, and they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son. This is talking about a person or persons who will be killed, and the people will be in mourning because of it. So to summarize the meaning of Zechariah 12:10, it is pertaining to the time of the end. It is not pertaining to the time of some New Testament Messiah 2,000 years ago. Elohim stated, "In that day I cut off the names of the idols from the earth, and they shall be remembered no more." Has that happened yet? Did that happen 2,000 years ago? No, it didn't. So it doesn't really matter who people think was being referred to in this verse as far as being thrusted through. It hasn't happened yet. It's for a time still to come at the end of days. You know what continues to amaze me is the more we dig into these so-called messianic references in the Tanakh, the more we study them out when we read them in context, we see that they just absolutely crumble away and are not at all what we thought they meant. Not at all. So I hope this video brought a lot more clarity to these verses that we went over, and it's a blessing to you. So shout out to everybody scattered worldwide in the dispersion who is truly Yisrael. Everybody be blessed and have a wonderful day.